Tonight, a woman is stabbed multiple times on a streetcar in yet another act of violence on the TTC.
For me, these things are often kind of reflective of broader issues that are going on in our city.
Police saying they don't believe the suspect and the victim knew one another. This as police arrest a group of 13-year-olds for assaulting two TTC workers yesterday. Plus,
well, my hope is that my client is released on bail.
Bail hearings for 7 of the 8 teenage girls charged in the swarming death of a Toronto man begin today, more than a month after the brutal attack. And
we did have the tables at least outside so we can keep going.
Cafe TO helped numerous restaurants stay afloat during the pandemic. Now the city wants to make it permanent, but at a cost to restaurant owners. Good evening, I'm Kelda Yoon. There was another violent incident on the TTC today. A woman in her 20s was stabbed multiple times this afternoon on a streetcar. This after 2 TTC employees were assaulted just yesterday and a TTC operator shot with a BB gun over the weekend. As Ali Chiasson reports, these latest attacks adding more fuel to calls to make the transit system safer.
At around 2:01 p.m., police received a call for a stabbing that was occurring on a streetcar. When the officers arrived, they located a female victim suffering from stab wounds to her head and face.
The victim, in her 20s, was taken to hospital by emergency run and is in stable condition. The suspect, a woman in her 40s, was arrested on scene and charged with aggravated assault.
At this point in time, it appears that they do not know each other.
This is just the latest in a string of violence on the TTC. Last night, 2 special constables were allegedly targeted on a Kennedy Road bus.
The bus driver basically just openly told me her bus just got swarmed.
It's Jennifer Davies' usual route.
She stopped, picked up a bunch of students coming from school. When they were getting off, they grabbed the 2 operators and dragged them off the bus with them, and apparently proceeded to beat them up and throw them down on the ground and whatever had happened.
Toronto police have arrested and charged 4 13-year-old boys with assault. The violence continued with more young people over the weekend when a bus driver was shot with a BB gun.
I fully looked up and saw what was happening. I was just hit right in the forehead, and this kid was just leaning out the car window, and it was, like an orange tipped BB gun, air rifle, whatever it was. He shouted at me, went, "F you, TTC," and they turned the corner and sped off.
Their injuries are not life-threatening, but this trend of violence is disturbing, not just for the victims, but commuters at large.
I just think it's disgraceful. It's absolutely disgraceful.
I feel great, actually, if more was done and invested in more security.
For me, these things are often kind of reflective of broader issues that are going on in our city.
But if people feel unsafe, that's what matters, and people are getting hurt.
TTC Chair John Burnside wants to get everyone to the table, from the mayor, TTC staff and their union, which is calling for a national transit task force so they can all talk solutions.
Let's not preclude any idea, and I think we need to be very open-minded about how we approach that, and let's not stifle the debate before it begins.
In the meantime, witnesses to any of these recent TTC assaults are asked to come forward. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
A man accused of pushing an elderly woman to the ground, who then died, is now facing an upgraded charge of manslaughter. 37-year-old Ryan Cunning appeared in court today and will return tomorrow for a bail hearing. The incident happened last Friday near Yonge and King. According to police, the 89-year-old victim was on the sidewalk when a man pushed her in what is believed to be an unprovoked attack. The woman fell to the ground and was pronounced dead at the scene. Police have not identified her, as investigators are working on notifying next of kin. The homicide and missing persons units have taken over the investigation. They are asking anyone with information to contact police. A 14-year-old boy is facing a number of charges, including attempted murder in relation to a stabbing earlier this month that left another teenage boy with life-threatening injuries. It happened on January 9th in a laneway near Harbord Street and Ossington Avenue. This security footage obtained by CBC shows a group of people in the alleyway at the time of the stabbing. Now, you can see several people fleeing the area after an altercation. It happened near Central Toronto Academy. The victim, a 17-year-old boy, is a student at the school. Now, he was critically injured in the attack, but has since been upgraded to stable condition. The accused is scheduled to appear in court later this week. An individual bail hearing was held today for one of the teens charged in the swarming death of a Toronto man. But after an all-day hearing, no decision was made, and the teen was remanded back into custody with the matter adjourned to next month. Now, she is among the 8 teenage girls who stand accused of beating and stabbing 59-year-old Ken Lee to death near Union Station last month. Chris Glover has more on today's proceedings.
Unlike most court appearances, at this one, because the co-accused are so young, we can show and tell you very little, other than the fact that the lawyer whose client had her bail hearing today says she should be out on bail.
It has everything to do with individual rights and the due process.
Just after midnight on December 18th, police say a homeless man was swarmed, beaten, and stabbed by a group of 8 girls aged 13 to 16. 5 weeks on, and now 2 of the 8 co-accused, charged with second-degree murder, have had bail hearings, while others won't have their hearings until the week after next.
It's usually within 24 hours or as soon as possible.
Criminologist Kim Varma says it is highly unusual for young offender bail decisions to take this long. But she says this case is unusual.
The seriousness of this case is unbelievable. The fact that there are 8 co-accused, that there are younger youth involved in this, it's a complicated case.
The only face in this case we are allowed to show you is the victim, 59-year-old Ken Lee. His family released a statement last week blasting the Youth Criminal Justice Act. It protects the criminal youths and not the victims or the public, the statement read. How are you protecting my child if the perpetrator cannot be named and she could be in my child's school or class? But criminologist Kim Varma says a youth's anonymity is critical since children and teens haven't developed as adults have.
You see people or hear people saying, do the crime, do the time like an adult. They're not the same. They're not considering the long-term consequences in many cases.
In Canada, 13-year-olds cannot be sentenced as adults, but 14-year-olds and older can be. So while all are presumed innocent at this point, the majority are potentially facing life in prison.
The publication ban on the identities of youth is something that should be there. It's generally recognized as a positive. Beyond that, my own view is that the act and the way it's been judicially interpreted goes way too far.
Ryder Gilliland is the lawyer who represented the media consortium, including CBC, trying to access court records in this case. He argues there's a transparency problem in that the 8 co-accused are being treated as a single group in the media.
With the level of secrecy that exists right now, it's very hard for the media to distinguish between them.
A problem that could become more pronounced, he says, as their individual culpability, even charges, may vary over the course of the trial. Chris Glover, CBC News, Toronto.
Colette Kennedy joins us now with a first check on the forecast. And Colette, tonight, still pretty calm, but tomorrow will be another story.
Yeah, we still have tonight to kind of prepare, or early tomorrow morning, in fact, when it'll likely just be cloudy or scattered flurries before this thing really ramps up. If there's something you must do, that would be the time to do it. And if you can plan to be working from home tomorrow, that's also a great idea. So we are in a snowfall warning stretching all the way from Windsor through Toronto, Kingston up to Cornwall, and in fact, beyond that into Quebec, areas there where there's a winter storm watch as the system will be moving in and affecting our Wednesday. Now, as this is going to play out, in the morning, we will be experiencing this into southwestern Ontario, all along the north shore of Lake Erie, and the winds will start to kick up from the east there earlier in the day. It's going to take some time until the afternoon that they really ramp up and get stronger, and that the snowfall intensifies through the Golden Horseshoe and around the GTA. And I will tell you that once it does ramp up, it'll be kind of quick. It's going to go from like almost nothing, and then suddenly you're getting snowfall rates of 1 to 3 centimeters per hour, and that's why we'll see significant accumulation accumulations. Rolling this through Wednesday evening, still having an impact through 11 o'clock and even into the next morning. But by then, I would anticipate it's just some flurries kind of lingering into eastern Ontario. There'll be some heavier snow amounts there, even more so than we're going to see elsewhere as it carries on. And you'll certainly be improving for tomorrow morning in southwestern Ontario. So overnight tonight, we're looking at that temperature down around -3. Tomorrow, not expecting it to go above freezing. It's close to the lakeshore where we could get some of that mixing and the lesser amounts of snowfall. We'll look at those totals all around when I come back.
Thanks so much, Colette. We have even more new details tonight about frauds targeting GTA homeowners. As we told you yesterday, these scams are more common than previously thought. In at least 4 cases, homes have been sold without the real homeowner's knowledge. A CBC Toronto investigation has revealed a link in some of these cases. It appears a Toronto man used a stolen identity to rent 2 of these homes, which were later listed for sale. Farr Morelli has these exclusive details.
So you might remember from our investigation that these fraud cases are being linked to organized crime and that these groups allegedly use so-called stand-ins to rent homes or pose as legitimate homeowners. What we've been able to piece together is that a 54-year-old so-called stand-in used the same forged identification to rent 2 Toronto homes. One of those was in the Beach, the other in Etobicoke. Both were rented around the same time, then quickly listed for sale by people posing as legitimate homeowners. The Etobicoke home was sold, which was the case Toronto police publicized. Meanwhile, the other sale was nixed at the 11th hour when the homeowner's family caught wind that the home was listed for sale and were able to uncover this alleged fraud. Now, we are not identifying the man who posed as a renter in both of these cases because he hasn't been charged in connection with these alleged home frauds. But what we can tell you is that he's currently on bail, facing about a dozen unrelated fraud and identity theft charges here in the GTA. So what we've heard from experts is stand-ins are not the masterminds behind these alleged real estate frauds, and that there are 4 or 5 organized crime groups that operate in different parts of the GTA. These stand-ins, again, people who pose as renters or the homeowner using fake ID, are shared between different groups. If someone of a specific ethnicity, for example, is needed, they'll be used in that instance. And what we've also learned is that it's a source of quick cash. Brian King is a private investigator who works mostly with one title insurance company to track down some of these people. He described some of these repeat fraudsters as B-player actors who know how to talk to realtors, lawyers, and others during a transaction.
They have to know the right answers to give to the lawyers. And the other part is that they've been successful. So when you're successful, you continue to do it, and it's easy money. Often the stand-in's role is just a few hours of time for $10,000 in cash payment.
Now, with all these details coming to light, there are a lot of questions about how this continues to happen. Later this week, we'll bring you an interview with homeowners who actually lost their home due to this situation, and also tell you about what changes people are calling for to make it harder for people to commit this type of fraud.
That was Farr Morelli reporting. The City of Toronto is hoping to make the popular Café TO program permanent. It was introduced during the pandemic to help struggling restaurants through the lockdown. But as Dale Manukduk reports, while the city is hoping to make the program a mainstay, it will come with some changes.
The kitchen inside Pantheon is busy, ready to serve up a full dining room. And while business is booming, it's even better in the summer when they add up to 60 seats, thanks in part to the Café TO program.
It kind of reminded me of Europe. I mean, last year we had a good weather as well, so that helped.
It might also help that the city is hoping to make the program permanent. But while the city previously covered all costs, restaurants will now have to pay.
We charge everybody else to use public space, and public space is scarce and precious. So the restaurants will now have to pay a fee, which is reasonable because indoor dining is permitted again.
Staff calculated that restaurant operators would pay on average about $1,450 in annual fees for a sidewalk patio or about $3,000 for a curb lane patio. The other major change, restaurants and cafes will now have to build an accessible platform at the height of the sidewalk. The good news is that this year there's federal money available to pay half the cost of the platforms. And speaking of money, according to the Toronto Area BIA, just last year the program had an economic impact of over $200 million.
And we're only talking for a short period here. We're talking for May through September. That was the period of the cafe.
Last year, over 1,300 establishments took part in Cafe TO, a huge leap from the 800 in 2020, providing extra seating for Toronto's booming culinary scene.
Toronto is now a Michelin-recognized destination, and yes, there were 74 restaurants in the guide, but I think everyone appreciates that's just the tip of the iceberg, right? That is just an indication of the depth of the culinary scene here.
One issue with Cafe TO that's come up over the last few years is that it removes street parking space, but this cycle store sees benefit in that as well.
It added bike lanes right in front of the store, which is a great thing. We would definitely rather see people riding their bikes and walking and enjoying the outdoors rather than, fighting for parking spots.
Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
Welcome back. Dozens of demonstrators called on City Council to cut the Toronto Police budget and redirect that money to community supports. That request comes as councillors got a final chance to scrutinize the city's proposed spending package at Budget Committee today. Municipal Affairs reporter Sean Jeffords tells us the budget battle is now headed to City Council.
Demonstrators gathered outside of City Hall while politicians huddled inside talking about the Toronto police budget. But frustration over a proposed $48 million increase for the police service soon found its way indoors. Protesters want the $1.1 billion budget cut in half. Organizer Robin Menard says the money is better spent elsewhere.
So I think that it's not unreasonable to ask that we fund people, that we fund communities, that we fund housing, that we fund decent, adequate food for everyone, as opposed to an armed force that continues to cause harm to so many of us.
The request comes as councillors pore over the city's proposed budget one last time at committee. Police are asking for an increase to hire 200 more officers to speed up emergency response times. Budget Chief Gary Crawford says the increase comes down to being able to provide better service.
We need to be able to provide the kind of community safety as quickly as possible.
Councillor Gord Perks wants to explore options that better use police resources.
I think that more and more Torontonians are coming to the view that investments in services is the best path to safety. Running better programs to support kids from low-income neighborhoods, putting more money into schools, helping people who are struggling with mental health and addiction get into housing.
The committee has endorsed the police budget increase, the 5.5% property tax increase, and the 1.5% city building levy hike. Councillor Diane Sachs says the budget also contains assumptions about how the city will get hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue.
Certainly it's a very frightening budget because we're so far in the hole. Even if we get giant checks from the federal and provincial governments, which are counted on this budget, but we don't have any guarantee that we'll get, plus the enormous cut that the provincial government did to our development charges, our ability to pay for growth. So we're in really deep trouble.
Mayor John Tory will now take the committee's recommendations and present a formal spending plan on February 1st. That package will go to City Council for a debate and vote on February 14th. Sean Jeffords, CBC News, Toronto.
A live shot of the Toronto skyline. It's been partly cloudy tonight with a snowfall warning in place. Currently, it is hovering around the freezing mark downtown. Let's go back to Colette now with a look at your extended forecast. And Colette, things expected to intensify tomorrow afternoon. We could end up with quite a bit of snow.
Yeah, so that is the timing of it, that it's in the afternoon hours that the GTHA will find things ramping up and those snowfall rates getting more intense. It starts earlier back towards Windsor and London and into southwestern Ontario, and the easterly winds will be kicking up too. So kind of just first of all taking you through the timeline, a reminder that we're in a snowfall warning for tomorrow, and then seeing that through the morning hours. Here it is 8 a.m. So the morning commute in the city isn't looking bad, right? You could get out and get some some things done in the morning, maybe some flurries beginning, but then that's when it starts to pick up into the mid-afternoon there, and you'll certainly be seeing that earlier back towards Kitchener and Waterloo areas. That's going to pick up Norfolk County as well. Easterly winds will also give some enhancement off the lake, so it does mean the west end of Lake Ontario could see some pockets with some even heavier amounts, and we'll take a look at those accumulations in a moment. But the timeline, that flurries just linger into the morning on Thursday, but otherwise it moves out. But we'll be dealing with this Wednesday afternoon, evening, and overnight. So a look at some of the snowfall potential. This 15 to 20 plus, meaning there could be some pockets here, Hamilton, Oakville, Burlington, where you could see amounts that do get up to that 20 or a little bit above. Close to the lakeshore, it's more likely to be that 10 to 15 centimeters because of some of that mixing. And into eastern Ontario, you're talking up to some areas, perhaps up to 30 centimeters as this moves through. So those temperatures overnight tonight, so important, as we're going to see that colder air filtering in. And then as the temperature comes up tomorrow, with a lot of these systems that we've had that ride through this area this winter, because it's been mild, it ends up being a bit of a miss in terms of it mixes so much with rainfall that we don't see the accumulations. A reminder, close to the lakeshore, that's likely, but elsewhere, this one looks like we're going to be staying into the cold sector, and that's why we're seeing these amounts being more significant. So for tomorrow, there you go, a high of just 0. And here's what I want you to notice in the long-range forecast are some of these colder readings and chillier overnights. So that means the snow we pick up on Wednesday, yes, winter sports fans, you can rejoice. Much of this is going to be sticking around as we go through. And in fact, to the beginning of next week, we're going to see a shot of much colder air. By the way, I'll leave you with this. Sunday, we have a chance of seeing more snowfall coming through the area.
All right. Finally tonight, Humber College receiving a record-breaking $30 million donation today.
This is the largest donation ever made to a Canadian college in history.
The purpose of our involvement with them was to help young people get a meaningful job and have a meaningful career for them, their family, and the community.
This is the biggest donation yet from the Barrett Family Foundation. In the past 8 years, the foundation has donated a total of $42 million to the school. This latest donation will support the college's science, technology, engineering, and mathematics programs, with 100 scholarships being awarded every year for the next 15 years. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, you can get caught up anytime. Just head to cbc.ca/Toronto. Maribel Tarouk has your next local newscast tomorrow at 6. I will see you back here tomorrow night at 11. Have a great night, everyone.